How's this? Okay, great. So we are recording. Welcome everyone to our live Ask Me Anything. My name is Eloisa and I'm here with Codacy and I'll be your moderator for this session. So the theme is code quality beyond bug fixing. And to talk about this, we have our software engineers here, Dan, Pedro, João, Rafael, who is also our product manager, and last but not least, Fabio, who is our product manager as well. This wonderful team of panelists have been developing the Codacy software, and today you get to ask them anything. Okay, so we'll have just a short introduction to those of you who may not be so familiar with Codacy or Pulse. And then after that, we're gonna jump straight into the questions. So you have your Q&A button here. It's at the bottom of your screen. Everyone can start sharing your questions as of now, as soon as you want to, and we'll give your questions priority. So let me try one thing. Let me try running a poll here. Relaunch. So I think if everything went well, you guys have a poll in front of your screen right now. And we want to ask you, how much time do you think you're spending on code reviews? Less than 1 hour, 1-2 hours daily, 2-3 hours daily, or more than 3 hours per day? So go ahead and vote. We see some votes coming in. I'll give you a few seconds to vote and then I'll end this poll and we'll find out what the majority voted. Okay, let's end the poll. I'll be sharing the results with you in just a minute. But right now, I'm going to pass this over to Dan. Okay, Dan, please take it away.
Hey everybody, I'm Dan. We're going to talk a little about Codacy, which is our original product, and Rafael will tell you a little bit about Pulse, our newer product, here in a minute. Codacy is all about software quality and is really focused on the team. So when we're talking about software quality, code quality, we really mean how well does your code adhere to the standards that your team has set forth? We know all teams are going to have different needs. All teams are going to look at their code differently. And it's up for them to really figure out what's important. So Eloisa, if we go to the next page. So when it comes to delivering software, which is engineers' true focus, right? We want to deliver things. We want to get things into production. We want to get our code being used. Waste and bugs are the enemy of that. We know that most developers are going to spend way too much time going ahead and fixing bad code or understanding code or repairing defects that never should have ended up in their code in the first place. I see from our poll that we have people spending sometimes 1 to 2 hours. I see 2 to 3 hours a day. That's 25% plus of your time dedicated to looking at code reviews. If we can shave off just a little bit of that, or maybe half that or more, then we're looking at hours of time per day saved that you can now put towards engineering or other pursuits. So next page. There we go. So there's 3 main things we want to touch on that Codacy does, and the first one is pushing left on those code reviews and looking at automation on each commit and each pull request that goes in. Can we catch things early? Can we say, this isn't up to standards, let's go ahead and fix it now before we get to the end of our feature, before we're trying to check it into dev, test, production. And as you can see here, Codacy takes care of that, and it will go ahead and fit those results. So those passes or failures, it'll put it right into your work stream, typically into your Git provider. Eloisa, next slide. Okay. Now, when you want to go a little deeper and look at trends in your code, when you'd like to see maybe what kind of issues you're getting, is something popping up more often than another? What's your legacy tech debt? And what do you want to start chopping away at first? Codacy is the central hub for that. And that's where you'll go and kind of look at charts by either your organization or your team level, your repo level, and where you can start looking at all the current issues you have in your project that you might need to fix. Eloisa, last slide. And then lastly, the security monitor. We know security is a major issue for everyone, especially it's started to become more important in the last 5-10 years as vulnerabilities have been, data intrusions, things like that have really been popping up in the news. So we make it easy to see exactly what's being covered by our analysis. So not just what bugs are showing up, but also what bugs aren't showing up that we caught and you know you're protected against. And we've made that a focus with our security monitor that kind of puts your mind at ease. So now I'm going to show a quick demo because I don't want to take up too much of your time of what Codacy does, just so you get a sense of it, and then we'll move on to Pulse. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and find the right page here. Okay. So real quick, when you come into Codacy, the first thing you see is the dashboard for your repo. So let's say I had this project here. I wanted to come in, and I could instantly see my trends around what's happening over the life of this project. I can see this team's actually been doing pretty well with its issues. Duplication's gone up a little bit, and our coverage has been pretty steady. We're a little under our average right now, but at a glance, I can tell exactly what's going on. And you can, as you can see here, we have a dedicated place to manage all your tools and all of your code patterns. So you can come in here and easily determine what's turned on. I'm not an admin on this page, so I can't turn these on or off, but you can see these would typically be green, telling you what's turned on, what's turned off. And you can see here what rules are available and what I've got covered. So let's go ahead and look at the automation really quickly. So I'm going to pick out a PR from one of my good friends who wrote a bad PR, Elio here. It's all right, we're not judging him. So this is what happens and what you'll see when I check in a PR that isn't up to my standards. This is what we see in Codacy. I see I've got 4 issues. It's failed and said essentially I've got to fix these 4 issues before I can go ahead and merge my code. And right here in GitHub, which is where this project is stored, I'd see this right in my flow, and I know exactly what I need to fix. So I've added some duplication here in this file, or Elio has. I'm gonna need Elio to fix this. And right here, I have something that doesn't meet our clean code standards. So I have some extra parentheses. And once he fixes these and checks it in, we'll reanalyze, and this will pass. And then we can focus really on the looking at the code and looking at, does it do what we expect it to do? And I don't need to worry about these little things. I know Codacy's got my duplication and my rules covered. So that's Codacy in a nutshell. And yeah, I'll pass it on to Rafael.
Thank you, Dan. Just in case you guys didn't get to see the poll results really quickly before we pass this on to Rafael, I'm going to share the results. So I think everyone can see now. This is the result of our poll. So most people are spending 1 to 2 hours every day. 50% of people who answered are spending 1 to 2 hours every day on code reviews. So I'll stop sharing the results now. And while we're at it, I wanted to do a second poll real quick. And here we go. I'm going to launch this poll, which is something about what Rafael is about to tell you. So it's, what are you using to predict the speed of your development? It's open to vote, so you guys can now vote on one of these 4 options. What is closest to what you use to predict the speed of your development?
So a quick introduction to Pulse, for those of you that don't know it yet. So Pulse is a new product that we're developing at Codacy. And to tell you all about it, I'll start with the same question that Dan started in his presentation. So what happens when we develop code that isn't clean or good or is bad? So we get harder to understand code base, and developers will spend more time there. We'll be refactoring and rewriting code, the kind of thing that Ben just mentioned. And we'll also have defects and bug reports that will come before the work that we had planned and delay our plans. And we have essentially longer development cycles. And so the point here is that maybe we could understand quality by understanding the productivity of our teams. And that's something that some research teams already done and very well, and we'll see that in a minute. But taking that assumption of measuring the performance of our teams, how would we do that? So there are teams trying to do estimates and different kinds of things, like measuring the lines of codes, the number of pull requests, the points of the tasks that are closed that you're seeing on the poll that you have on your screen now. And those are not necessarily the best approach. So you want to think here that your team comes first and you don't want to measure individual productivity. Another difficulty is how are you going to measure it? So it's very hard that if you can agree on what you want to measure, but getting to the point where you know how to measure it, it can be very hard because you can get into discussions about how to get accurate data that is not that relevant, because estimations and approximation at this point are much more relevant for you to get a clear picture of your team than just getting and wasting time on things that are not relevant. And the final step on the maturity track of engineering performance is knowing how to improve. But we'll see more about that in a second. So I don't know if you all know this book, but it's Accelerate, and it's the reference for this area. And they had several amazing findings. And the first, which is very interesting, is that there's this balance of speed and quality that is essentially predictive of the business outcomes and the success of your organization. And so you can really, if you focus on finding that balance, it's almost guaranteed, or there is a statistic significance that you will be performance and will achieve your business outcomes. And so what we did, we built a product around that. And what you're seeing now is just a simple screen where we're measuring the key metrics that were introduced on that book. So development frequency, lead time for change, median time to recover, change failure rates. They're the accelerate metrics, the dollar metrics, the DevOps metrics. Two of them give you a sense of how the speed of your team is doing, the other the quality of your team. And together they make that balance that you should narrowly balance of how your team is doing. Another interesting thing that book and the follow-up research studies gave us was a market analysis of what the most successful teams are doing. So you can compare to what other companies are doing, like Google and Datadog. So you could compare yourself to those companies. And it's not only about these metrics that the book talks about. There are other, let's call it capabilities, practice that your team should adopt. And those are the things that will fuel how you perform at these metrics. And to help you adopt those practices, we developed several features inside our product. So you have the overall dashboard where you get the overview of the dollar metrics. Then to support the analysis of the lead time, we track the life cycle of code reviews, for example. And we also help you monitor work in progress, so you to keep an attention on the amount of work in progress and the amount of work that you have open at the time. And that's really it for Pulse. We think that if there is no absolute code quality standard, and maybe we can discuss that, what you think about next in the Q&A, but there is no absolute concept of code quality. So it's really about walking this thread on what's the best balance for business outcome and you actually being able to deliver and the quality of your product and walking that line. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm just saying. So walking the balance of speed and quality, you get to be able to understand how engineering affects your business objectives. And also more important, something that the DevOps culture talks about a lot is empowering the teams to make their own choices, which is the real way for them to be successful. I think this is back to you, Elisa.
Thank you, Rafael. I will just share my screen now.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's just start with the results of this last poll. So we asked you, what are you using to predict the speed of your development? And I'm sharing the results now, so you should see this on your screen. But I can tell you that 45% of people, so most of the people who voted, measure that by number of tasks completed. That's interesting. I'll stop sharing. Okay, and now, like I said before, officially, we're gonna reserve this space for Q&A only. Now, I hope you know a little bit more about Codacy, a little bit more about Pulse, if you didn't already before. And you can go ahead and use the Q&A button on your screen. And these guys are here available to answer anything. We'll give you a couple of minutes. Did you have anything to ask? Don't be shy. Okay, we have one question. So, oh, we have more. So we're gonna start answering them one by one. Okay, great. So is Pulse integrated with Codacy?
Yeah, I can take that one. So at the moment, no. And that's something that we're still exploring, but at the moment, no. They're two separate products. In Codacy, you get the quality overview, and on Pulse, you get the performance overview, where you see both quality metrics and speed metrics, whilst our quality difference is slightly different. Thank you for the question. Thank you.
So I'll mark this as done. Another question. May you, oh, let me see if everyone can see you now. May you elaborate on how you measure complexity in Codacy? Anyone?
Yeah, I can field that one. So complexity is cyclomatic complexity. If you're not familiar with that, we can, I would recommend diving deeper, but essentially for those that don't know, that's the number of loops and nests in your code. So typically gets more complicated as you nest further. And each of those, in each language, we have a different tool that measures it. But we're essentially looking at how complicated is your code based on the nested loops and nested paths.
Great, thank you. Hold on, because someone is typing an answer.
I was just typing the answer for the question that is already there, just to leave it in the answer part.
Okay, sure. So maybe let's move on to the next one. This is from, I'm sorry, I don't know if I can say your name right, Jerwin Angel. Answer live here. What actionable items do you recommend when the code quality goes down in a project? And how should a team respond to a drop in quality?
I hate to take all the fun, so I'll start and I'll let someone else jump in if they'd like. So the ideal thing, and this is where Codacy comes in, is that your quality never drops once you start implementing a tool like a Codacy, because you're catching things so early that you're not allowing any new tech debt in. So that's ideal. If you do find your quality going down, the first thing I do is figure out why. So maybe you need to tighten up those gates. And then second, I would look at, are you noticing, this is where something like Pulse comes in, are you noticing that your people are taking more time to fix those issues? Because if your quality is going down, but you're still delivering just as fast, people aren't complaining, then maybe you need to look at those rules because they're not actually affecting your outcomes. So that's kind of the order I would progress in that analysis. Rafael or anyone else want to hop in?
Yeah, I think that's that. And what you said, try to understand what the impact that it's trying to have on the speed of your team, for example. and then try to prioritize it like you would prioritize product development. But that's me coming from a product background. As I would prioritize other initiatives, I would see, is not losing this speed more important than delivering X? So then it's something that we should tackle. And yeah, answering maybe the other part of the question, what actionable items? Well, Codacy, the overview gives you a breakdown into several code quality metrics. Looking at each of them individually would be interesting to understand what is actually being affected. Is it the code that is getting messier by a surge of issues? Is it the architecture because complexity and duplication are both getting worse? Is it testability because coverage is getting lower? And it's trying to identify what we can get from the metrics, seeing what's in the impact and prioritizing it. That would be my approach.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave this here in case anyone wants to write the answer, and one of our panelists. Okay, someone is saying that the sound is a little bit low. We'll try working on that. Thank you. Do you have any more questions for us? Oh, one more. Okay, so let's answer this question. I don't know if I can answer live and then we can type at the same time. We'll find out. Well, how do you deal? So this is for all of our panelists. If anyone who wishes to answer, how do you deal with false positives in the tool reports?
I can take it a bit. Well, it depends a lot where your false positives, what do they mean, right? Sometimes it may mean that you're not configuring your analysis well. You're like including stuff that may not be relevant for your team's definition of quality. And in that case, an adjustment on what actually is being reported is good. Talking specifically about really like you want a pattern and it's kind of triggering in situations where you don't want it to. So depending on which is the tool, usually you have some annotations that you can do inline in code, and Codacy, since underlying it will run the same tool that you have locally, it will pick up that configuration and ignore those false positives. If it's just one specific situation, Codacy also allows you to manage how do you ignore issues, and this can also be a tool that you can use. If there's a situation that I've seen sometimes as well, is that you define a code quality, the parameters that we calculate the quality with, so like the patterns that will be applied to your code. Sometimes teams define them targeted as to the main code logic and not to the tests part, and I've seen a lot of times that issues are being triggered on the tests that people don't want. And right now there's some ways for you to mitigate that through the product itself or through configuration. You can disable analysis on some files for some tools and stuff like that, so you can guarantee that you don't have like false positives that usually come up from a specific section of the project where you're not very worried about code quality. So that can also be a thing. Sorry, that was multiple answers, but it's also like not a straightforward issue.
All right, thank you. Here's another one. What is coverage in Codacy?
I can go for that one. So yeah, basically, as Dan also mentioned, right? So our plan is to try to make sure that through pull requests, mostly that things are going to be stable or even improve, right? You don't want to go down. So our coverage, how it works, it's basically you have your tests and your coverage set up on your pipeline. So it's something that is done on the pipeline, and then as your flow, you upload the coverage to Codacy. So as on Codacy, we through gates where you can say how is important for you the coverage, like the coverage cannot drop on any PR and stuff like that, right? So by configuring that, what you allow is by uploading the coverage that you, if you have tests and you generate coverage that you already do, you upload that report to Codacy, and then Codacy will verify if it is according to your standards, and then it allows you like to mark a PR as good or bad, and then you can work accordingly. And then also like we saw on the dashboards, you can also see the progress and all that stuff. So ideally you have the rules to not make it worse, and then you can also see how it progress. So it's more on the visualize and make sure you keep improving side. Yeah. Not sure if anyone wants to add anything else, but yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. We have one more question. Let me put here. Okay, so how is Pulse, this is for Pulse, how is Pulse gathering info to measure the metrics it provides? And does it need access to Jira or other type of management tool?
That's an interesting question. So how Pulse works today is it either integrates with a Git provider tool like GitHub or Bitbucket, but at the moment just GitHub, and extracts data from there and calculates the metric from that. You can also enrich it with information from incident tracking tools like PagerDuty or Datadog, for example. When it comes to Jira, and this is something that we're building now, which is we're adding more detail to the accelerate metrics and the dashboards that I showed previously. And we're going to calculate more in-depth metrics like lead time and cycle time from your issue tracker. And yes, we're working on a Jira integration for that.
Cool. Okay, so if we're done answering this question, let us know in the chat if we answered your question in the best way possible, or if you have anything else, to say, feel free. Here's another question. This is about what languages or stacks we are supporting.
So I would seem this more of a question for Codacy than for Pulse. Yeah, I would be here a bit of time if I would be just naming all the languages and stacks that we support. Overall, like mainly, well, the most used like backend languages, so Java, Scala, C++, C#, Python, all of these things are, and JavaScript server side, of course, they're all supported in Codacy. Yeah, also front-end stuff, you have it there. So we have good support, great support for JavaScript even. And inside the JavaScript section, we have stuff for you to use TypeScript, and for people that use stacks with React or with Angular or Vue, we have different rules for those that you can customize. And yeah, basically, overall we're supporting, I think, 40 plus languages now, and inside each of those, there's different flavors for different kinds of stacks that you can use.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I also shared on the chat the link for our documentation where we have like the list of the tools with the languages, so you guys can check.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I think we have this link here in the chat, and I think we also have the link here in the Q&A. Amazing. Oh, here's one more question. So, are there specific features that static analysis tools commonly provide that you think are bad ideas or counterproductive?
Oh man, opinions? I will give you opinions, and then I'll let other people chime in too. Personally, I mean, static analysis is what you make of it. And the reason the rules are there in most tools is because someone wanted to use them. Personally, I think the biggest mistake is using a cookie cutter set of rules and not reviewing that. That's the worst idea, as most people do say ESLint, because that's one that frustrates me, is grabbing the Airbnb or the Google standards and going, starting work and then being like, yeah, I forgot a semicolon. Why are you breaking my build? Now I gotta go find that and whatnot. And I end up wasting more time because I didn't review or I got frustrated because it's not my idea of clean code. So I think that's the thing I would always say to anyone that's starting with stack analysis is take 10, 15 minutes, actually look what the rule set really is and make sure it fits you. Because otherwise you're gonna be in the middle of something and you're gonna get held up because you don't actually know what it's linting against or what it's checking against.
Yeah, I think for me, like also, I'll go a lot in line with what you're saying, and on my answer previously on the false positives, is that static analysis tools do a very precise thing, and they don't do anything for you. Instead of they just flag stuff for you. Usually, what you don't want is to try to get someone else's definition of quality. So you should know what matters to you and your team, so you can without this false positives and noise that can deter you from your main objective as a team.
Let me also give a bit of a different well, then he's happy that I'm not. No, it's just that so I think what you guys saying, it makes a lot of sense, right? But also there is maybe different stages of a project of a team, right? And maybe on some stages this can make sense, right? So just to say that, just because usually if you put this in the middle of a project and you are trying, everyone will get mad, everyone in your team will get mad at you. But if the team wants, okay guys, let's just focus on the standard, let's focus on something that exists, let's just keep using Airbnb and we'll adapt, right? And that also can be a different way of looking at it. We don't have yet a good standard, so let's try to not reinvent the wheel again. Let's not make another JavaScript framework just for our needs, right? Or stuff like that. So it also depends on the stages. But I agree with you guys. Just add this.
Okay, so does anyone else want to say anything?
I think, I can comment based on what Rafael was saying before. 100% quality level is not the optimal point that you probably want to be, because you need a balance. You need a balance between your quality and your speed and the health of your team, for example, and the happiness of everyone. So it's a balance, and that's why when you copy something straight from a different company, it may not work for your context.
Great question. Great question. So I'm gonna say mark it done, but you guys can still see all the answers, the questions that have been answered here in the answered section of the Q&A. We'll keep this Q&A open for the next 20 minutes. So if anybody wants to ask a question, you can. In the meantime, we're gonna answer some other questions that we've gathered here in our backlog. Okay, no, false alarm. So like I was saying, let's move on to some different questions that we had here beforehand. But like I said, feel free to keep on asking anything here in the Q&A. In the meantime, let me ask you this: what is code quality, and more importantly, how do you track technical debt?
So I'll jump in on the technical debt piece, because we talked a lot about code quality and definitions. In terms of tracking technical debt, we mentioned it earlier, and I'll double down on it. Track it like any other piece of code or functionality. It shouldn't be something that some people are going to go knock out little things on their own, but in general, if you want to tackle it as a team, it needs to go into your backlog. And if it's not worthy of being your backlog, then maybe it's actually not slowing you down. It's not hurting your team. That's what I always say. If technical debt isn't a first class issue, then you probably need to reevaluate what you consider technical debt.
Awesome. Okay. Let's jump into another question that we just got here
I think
live.
someone else wants to jump in real quick.
I was going to discuss a
Oh,
little
sorry.
bit.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, just to say, like in like you're saying, and sometimes this can happen a lot, and it's a pitfall, right? That you can collect a lot of technical debt tasks and you put it on this huge backlog, and like it's never a priority, you never tackle it, right? And it can become a problem. And one thing that can help as well is when you identify what problems that you have, right? You can try to incorporate it a bit as part of your daily development cycle, right? As part of your product, right? You are planning an epic, or you're planning something, you know, okay, we need to change this on, let's say, the payments part. So now that we are doing some feature that will touch the payments, now it's the time to say, okay, this epic may take a little bit more time because we need to tackle this, but it will be on this scope. And then it's an easier sell to, okay, as an engineering team, we will tackle this part to try to improve on the future, right? Which is an easier sell than just say, hey, let's stop a month to tackle like this backlog that you cannot justify the value. So it's also one thing where you can try to tackle some. It's like if you put it as part of like product when it makes sense, right? Because in the end, you want to deliver value. So yeah, with that in mind.
All right. Before we try another question, here's something that we got in the live Q&A. I'm not sure if I'm understanding this 100%, but let's see. Do you support, and if so, how, financially or OSS contributions, the tools you're supporting?
Yeah, so I think, and I think I understand what you're saying here. So do we give back to, we use a lot of open source tools almost exclusively. Do we give back to those tools? As a company, we don't, and anyone correct me if I'm wrong here, we don't financially like set aside time to go in and contribute back. It's not like we set aside hours in on our team schedule. But we have in the past had people individually give back to those tools. We are certainly focused on open source. For using open source, we like giving back as engineers, but we have not, as a startup, set aside money for it.
Yeah, I would say that's basically what we do. We have never, I think, had a program where we would financially contribute to the open source stuff that we use. But yeah, on occasion, our customers will notice a problem that they are experiencing through Codacy, but that comes from an underlying linter. And sometimes it happens that we go into those open source code bases and maybe suggest a fix, although it's we try to focus more on developing the product itself.
So there is one actually interesting tidbit that we probably, I don't know if we can quite count it as supporting, but because people discover tools through Codacy, some of these open source tools, they start to contribute and they start to fix things they find. And we've actually had a few companies open up like plugins. So like ESLint plugins, they had privately, locally, they had to open up and make public so it could get used in Codacy. There's been one or two instances of that. So
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
as a side, we have influenced some of these projects.
Yeah. It may also be relevant since we're talking about like what do we do for open source people. We do have we do give our products for free if you are using an open source organization and repos in your provider. So yeah, every or most of the features that you can get while paying Codacy will be available for you in open source in unlimited time.
All right, great. So I can mark this as done. Thank you guys for also saying stuff on the chat. Okay, so we're still open for some questions. In the meantime, I want to bring this back. If you look to our slides over here, here's another question for everyone here in the panel. What are some challenges that you face to keep your code quality up to standards?
Maybe someone from the engineering team, no?
Yeah. So, like, challenges on keeping code quality. Well, we've spoke about this a bit throughout the other questions, and I think one of the main ones is although if an engineering team can recognize that there's tech debt and some code quality issues in the code bases that they are working, it's always a balance between what fits the goals of the team and by extension the company, and what also fits the team working faster and enabling better development and for developers to be happier while developing. And yeah, so there's no like big silver bullet to answer this question. As we try to follow a mixed approach, sometimes we have some things that we know that we can tackle on the side because they're and as topics themselves and not as part of a bigger overarching topic. And sometimes we take some time for like small iterations to fix some of these things. But usually we try to incorporate it in product development. And that's the big goal here, is that our engineering team efforts are not driven by a need to fix some instance of code quality, but that it is driven by fixing stuff that we are going to touch on some specific feature, while at the same time having a product like Codacy that does some gatekeeping on new code, so we can control better the enterings of tech debt and drops in code quality.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I'm just bringing this back to the Q&A. We got one more question since we still have a few minutes. How can Codacy insights reports help deciding which code quality problems we'll tackle first?
I think I can provide a bit of an answer here, and then someone else can complement the answer. But this is an interesting question because it touches with the roadmap that we have for the next year. So our biggest theme that we'll tackle in 2022 is about this reporting and the insights that we provide at Codacy. So I just want to give clarity to everyone that we expect to have a much more robust product next year about this, and it will be one of our focus on the area of what type of insights you can get out of Codacy and the value that you can get out of Codacy with metrics that we already provide, but the way that the information is presented and the way that you can consume the data.
Just to build on what Fabio was saying, right? That so we want to focus more on this because although we do help on some things, we have the dashboards and can see some things, we are not maybe opinionative enough, you know, like in terms of like what can you do to actually to improve. So we want to work a bit better on giving that extra to you guys. So we focus more like on making sure that your code keep like stable or improving, but on some other things you kind of need to see the information and understand for yourself where you need to tackle first. So that's something that we want to keep improving to give better solutions for you guys as well.
Yeah, and of course, like just on the conversation of what do we provide right now, there's still a bunch of things that you can act upon and that you can see in like your repository dashboard and you have then some views to be able to break this down. So you can have a good at least a good assessment of overall how is your repository's code covered by tests. And if you see that that number is very low, that maybe that will give you an insight on that you should invest a bit more on that. Or at the same time, in our issue view, you can filter overall issues that were found in your repository by different categories, and you can find out that maybe you're accumulating a lot of security issues and you want to tackle those. So although we are going to give you more news on these things later, we'll probably get you faster ways and better ways to look at this data. But right now you can already get some pretty good insights on what was detected on your repository historically, and how is the current health of like coverage data and stuff like that for the repo at this time.
I'll jump in here as well, because on my wish list of things to tackle, and I don't think we're giving away any secret sauce here, that I like to look at what files change the most. So you're kind of looking at, if you look at a heat map of what's changing time and time again, those code quality issues are going to be both, they're probably costing you more, and they're more likely to cause defects if that code's changing more often. And then second, looking at if you understand how your code flows and where which upstream or downstream code is getting hit more often. So if I'm trying to understand the piece of code I'm working on, and I look upstream and there's something that has a whole lot of quality issues, it might take me longer to understand that code than if we clean it up. So looking at those two, looking at your code in those two ways can also help you to understand what to tackle first. And those are two things I'd like to work on automating, but that's, like I said, a wish list.
Great, thank you. Let me mark this as done. We have another opinion question, so I'll just say it. What is your favorite feature for a static analysis tool that some but too few tools support? What do you guys think?
Auto fixes are suggestions of fixes. It's something that we tried to leverage in the past at Codacy, and that provides developers with a very good way to even have them to care less about those common problems that can be detected and fixed automatically. And one good example of this is one of the industry standards for JavaScript, which is ESLint. I'm sure that anyone that is in this call that has worked with JavaScript has worked with ESLint. ESLint actually gives you this feature. It doesn't give you for all of the possible issues detected, but it already, for smaller stuff, it's able to detect the problem, tell you what it is, and suggest what would be the replacement on a line of code. And that's actually something that we'll leverage at Codacy. And I really wish that we had more. So currently you have a feature in, if you have a repository that is using ESLint or Markdown, right now Codacy is able to, instead of just posting a comment saying that, oh, we found this issue through this tool, we can actually, if you're integrating with GitHub that has this suggestions thing in the PR, we actually post suggested fixes that you can apply with just one click. So wrapping around to the question, most definitely suggestions of fixes, because it helps a lot. It helps me as a developer just on my day-to-day work, and it's also a cool feature for Codacy users to have. And as much support is brought for this in the open source tools, we will bring it into the product for sure.
Yeah, I can't, unfortunately, I can't argue against you in that one, because like doing a pull request, especially as on Markdown, as you mentioned, like have some bad indentation or something and go into GitHub and just say bulk add suggestion, bam, 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 click, and it's done. It's very cool. So yeah, I can't argue with you on that one. So yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else want to answer, or can we close this one as well? Okay, let's close it. I think this brings us to the end of our Q&A because we only have a couple minutes left. Let me just skip through some slides here and just say thank you all for joining because we do only have a couple of minutes left. Unless you have any last minute questions for our Q&A button, I mean, you can still shoot your shot. But I just want to thank everyone here for joining this Q&A. And have you joined our community yet? If you want to go to community.codacy.com to keep this conversation going, discuss any topics, ask us any more questions, and reach out to our team, you can. Other than that, we're very happy to see you today. And I think we had some very interesting questions here. For our engineers,